300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field. The last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malcolm with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad you could join me on a Wednesday morning. A lot of interesting things to talk about. I'm going to be ranking the remaining 8 teams in the NFL playoffs. And unfortunately, I am going to address a legend in women's basketball passing away, Lusia Harris. I'm going to touch on that towards the end of the show. But I do want to start with some interesting comments that were made by Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott tweeted an apology after the comments he made regarding the referees in the brutal outcome between the Cowboys and the 49ers, obviously, on Saturday was when the game was played, or Sunday was when the game was played, the wild card game between the 49ers and the Dallas Cowboys. Cowboys lost 23-17, and the final play of the game drew a lot of heads, and it drew the ire of critics because some amalgamation of Dak Prescott, Mike McCarthy, and Kellen Moore decided to run a QB draw with the expectation, the belief that they'd have enough time to spike it. So that was their play. Whatever we know the result, they ended up losing. The refs didn't allot them enough time to spike the ball. Regardless, and needless to say, that with that being said, the reason why we're discussing this is because of the post-game remarks and the types of comments that Dak Prescott made in his post-game remarks. And for the first time in Dak Prescott's career, his character unraveled. Dak Prescott has always been an extremely polished, professional, classy, stand-up guy. He has aced the podiums, aced every single interview. Every single time he's supposed to speak on behalf of the Cowboys in front of the media, he's nailed it. He has represented and has served as the face of the franchise in exemplary fashion. But on Sunday, when he was asked about Cowboys fans throwing debris and other objects on the referees as they were trying to exit off the field at the end of that controversial ending between the Cowboys and the 49ers, he endorsed their behavior. And he was condoning it. And said, quote, credit to them then. Credit to them. Initially, he was asked that question, but he thought it was that the Cowboys fans were throwing it to the Cowboys players, which he condemned. But when it came to throwing it on the referees, he was cool with it. And retrospection is a really interesting thing. Because it's not simply looking back and reflecting on your own actions and evaluating yourself, but retrospection is also evaluating how your own actions landed with other people and how they reacted to your actions. That's also what's a part of retrospection. And what happened was Dak Prescott, after he uttered those comments about the referees, he was on the receiving end of a barrage of criticism and backlash from the media, from fans, from the NBA Referees Union. They released a powerful statement condemning that type of behavior, condemning that type of deplorable action, and claiming that Dak Prescott is a leader in the NFL and he should be better and he should do better. And it's only after those comments were made and those statements were issued that Dak Prescott felt the need to tweet out an apology on Twitter. And in my opinion, this is why he's come out with this new softened stance and is trying to retract and walk back some of his statements, is because of the public backlash. He wants and is seeking a little public remorse here. Now, again, in fairness to him, Dak Prescott has built up a reputation as being a stand-up guy, as being extremely, extremely professional. He's a well-respected individual amongst the NFL community. He is a finalist and is the Dallas Cowboys nominee for the Walter Payton Man of the Year award, and it's deserving. But I think part of what happened was because of that extremely negative reaction to what he said, he felt implored, that almost implored him to have to issue this apology. Because there's no question that when you are participating in highly emotional activities and you lose in a highly emotional fashion, emotion can cause you to say regrettable things. And I have no doubt that he was caught up in the emotion, and he truly probably is sorry for those comments he uttered regarding those referees. However, in the same breath, it doesn't necessarily mean that he doesn't believe what he said. And I think that he truthfully was extremely frustrated. He was extremely disappointed and upset with the fact that the referees didn't line up with the Cowboys in time for them to spike it and get off another play. Because I actually do think, to Dak's credit, regardless of whether or not they should have won that game, I did think that their players had gone up to the line of scrimmage fast enough and organized enough where if the referee perhaps was able to spot it a second faster, they could have gone off a spike. I do believe that is the case. I'll give him that. But both he and Mike McCarthy defended the calls, they defended the plays, and not only did they defend it, but they doubled down on it, because Dak Prescott was given an opportunity to walk back those comments, and he didn't. A reporter asked him, almost kind of chuckling with other reporters before, Dak, did you really mean to kind of put the blame on the refs and condone this type of behavior? And he said, if they were just as disrespected as we were about that play, then yeah, I have no problem with it. And so, again, retrospection is an important thing here, because it's easy to just look back at actions you did and say, oh, I regret that because they are hurtful, because that type of behavior should be intolerable. It's another thing to look back at your actions and regret them because of the reaction of others, with how it landed with other people. And unfortunately, in this instance, while I want to give Dak Prescott the benefit of the doubt, because he has been such a good guy throughout his entire career, and he's been the face of the franchise and has respected that title, I just don't truly believe him that much. And I think that issuing this Twitter apology was more to try to save face and to gain a little bit of public remorse, more so than it is he's truly apologetic and sorry for those comments about the refs. So am I glad ultimately that he issued an apology for whatever it is? Yes. I think that in a vacuum, it's important that he did that. He probably should have delivered that a little bit more expeditiously, but he could have gone it out there, I think, faster. But the bottom line is he did issue an apology, which is important. I just question how legitimate and valid it is because, again, he was justifying that type of behavior. And it wasn't until over 72 hours that he came out and condemned that type of action. So makes me a little bit wary, a little bit leery that perhaps his comments aren't fully masking over, or at least these Twitter comments don't fully mask over how he truly feels. That's just me. So this was interesting. This was an interesting little exercise that I wanted to discuss. So the divisional rounds are obviously taking place starting this Saturday and Sunday. We have some great matchups. Cincinnati Bengals and the Titans on Saturday, the 49ers and the Packers on Saturday, and then on Sunday, the other two remaining games, the Bucs and the Rams and the Chiefs and the Bills, all going to be fantastic games. But I think it's interesting to look at these 8 teams that are remaining and to rank, almost create a power ranking between these 8 teams that are left. So here is my power rankings with the 8 teams that are remaining in the postseason. So at number 8, I've got the Cincinnati Bengals. Listen, this is a team that collected their first playoff win in 31 years, since 1990. And the type of season that they've had, the Cincinnati's have been this incredible, heartwarming story all season. But let's be honest about them. Outside of their locker room, outside of the city of Cincinnati, outside of the state of Ohio, no one really expected this team to reach the playoffs, let alone win a playoff game. So I do think that proper context is important because when you compare the personnel from top to bottom of the Bengals, juxtapose the other 7 teams, they are a lot weaker. Now, I love Joe Burrow. He is ascending before our very eyes. The type of moxie and the confidence that he plays with certainly permeates that locker room. And Jamar Chase is big time. T. Higgins is a great wide receiver. Joe Mixon, I love that they can run the football. But when you look at their personnel, again, it's not like they have better personnel than other teams. In fact, I'd argue that the Las Vegas Raiders had better personnel from top to bottom than the Bengals, but their elite players are just on a different level compared to some other teams. So they're able to overcome those perhaps disparities in talent at other positions. And Zach Taylor, listen, I like Zach Taylor. He's proving to be a young, intelligent coach, came over from the Rams under Sean McVay as the quarterback's coach. I think he's doing a really good job. But the reality is, when you compare him to the other coaches remaining in this postseason, he's the least decorated. He has the least pedigree as it relates to coaching. And I think that the later stages you get in the postseason, that can be a little bit concerning. So I have the Cincinnati Bengals at number 8. At number 7, the San Francisco 49ers. I love almost everything about the San Francisco 49ers. Their skilled positions are elite. Deebo Samuel is one of my favorite players in the NFL. I think he's the most versatile player in the NFL, the ultimate Swiss Army knife. You can line him up on the outside, give him 10 targets as a receiver. You can line him up in the backfield and just hand it off to him like a physical, almost like Cordero Patterson running back. He does everything extremely well. George Kittle is a top 2 or 3 tight end in the NFL. Some people have argued he's the best tight end in the NFL, given how elite he is at blocking. Brandon Ayuk is a nice weapon. And then this guy, Juwan Jennings, he's just emerged as the go-to third down weapon for Jimmy Garoppolo. Every single time it seems like they need to hit someone on a critical third down, they target Jennings. and he's been really good. Defensively, the only concern that I have is the health of Nick Bosa and Fred Warner. Nick Bosa ended up being in concussion protocol for about a quarter and a half in the Cowboys 49ers game. So I have some questions about how healthy is he. Fred Warner also kind of is dealing with an ankle injury. I'm not sure what type of condition he's in, but I really like San Francisco's defense. Their front four can get after you. Secondary, a little bit more exploitable, but really good team from top to bottom. My concerns with them are with their late game quarterback play and coaching, because their late game execution has been poor. They nearly blew that game against the Dallas Cowboys. That was a game that they should have easily won going away. And it was a lot closer because of some poor execution. And again, I really like Kyle Shanahan as a play caller. But if you look at his history as a coach and as an assistant, the end of games are where his teams have kind of fallen apart a little bit. And Jimmy Garoppolo, while I do think he has been maligned, improperly maligned and disrespected, he also has missed on some key fourth quarter throws that I think he's going to have to hit, and especially second half throws that he's going to have to hit. So those are my concerns about the 49ers, is their late game execution, which is why I have them at number 7. At number 6, I have the Tennessee Titans. Now, I know people are going to think that I'm disrespecting the Tennessee Titans here. And I love A.J. Brown, a big physical wide receiver on the outside. They're getting Julio Jones back. So he's obviously a huge threat anytime he steps onto the field. But here's the problem. Of all the remaining quarterbacks in these NFL playoffs, of the 8 teams, even though the Tennessee Titans are the number 1 seed in the AFC, and what they've done and how they've managed to rally around Derrick Henry's injury to still not only stay relevant, but hold on to the number 1 seed in the AFC is extremely impressive and commendable. Of all the remaining quarterbacks in these playoffs, I would argue that Ryan Tannehill is probably the worst. Now, he's not bad. He's an above average quarterback, but I'd probably have Jimmy Garoppolo nodded a little bit ahead of him, and that's a problem. Your quarterback can't be the worst quarterback of the remaining postseason teams for you to be in that top 3 or 4 upper echelon of teams. And when you look at the last couple of postseasons for the Tennessee Titans, 2019, when the Titans actually reached the AFC Championship game, they played 3 games. Played in the wild card game. That's when they upset Tom Brady and ostensibly forced his way out of New England. They went after that game to Baltimore on the road, and then they went to Kansas City. Well, they lost to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, but against the Patriots, Ryan Tannehill completed, and against Baltimore in that entire postseason run, Ryan Tannehill only completed 60% of his passes, yet the reason they won is because Derrick Henry went off for 185 rushing yards and then 182 rushing yards and then 195 rushing yards in back-to-back playoff games against the Patriots and the Ravens. Last year, when Derrick Henry was bottled up against the Ravens, Tannehill completed 69% of his passes, and yet they were handled easily. So those are the concerns that I have, because my reservation is, okay, I know that Derrick Henry is supposed to come back and he's now on the active roster list, but what does that mean? What version of Derrick Henry, how healthy is he? Because I think the version of Derrick Henry that we get is going to determine what kind of Ryan Tannehill we get. I think those two guys, they don't go hand to hand, but I think Tannehill's play can sometimes reflect the type of production that Derrick Henry gives them. So that's my biggest reservation about them. Their defense is 12th. It's not elite, but it's not bad. That's why right now I've got them, though, at number 6. At number 5, I've got the Buffalo Bills. This is a team that's rolling. They've won 5 straight games. They annihilated the Patriots 47-17 on Saturday. I think that this was the single best game of Josh Allen's career that I've seen. 21 of 25, over 300 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. They obviously have a plethora of wide receivers to go to. Stephon Diggs is an elite number one. Emmanuel Sanders, Gabriel Davis are very solid as well. Cole Beasley, a nice slot receiver. Dawson Knox, big physical tight end who can make catches through traffic. And so I like those receivers. The concern that I kind of have is their run game. Now, I know they were one of the better running football teams in the regular season, and I know that they ran for 174 rushing yards against the Patriots. Devin Singletary rushed for 82 and 2 touchdowns. But really, Josh Allen is the bigger running threat at the quarterback position. He had 66 rushing yards in that game. Am I entirely convinced that you can rely and just hand the ball off to Devin Singletary to close out games, to collect major first downs, to close out games later in this postseason against the Chiefs and against other teams? I'm a little bit concerned about that. So that's the problem that I have. Not to mention, they were going up against a rookie quarterback in absolutely frigid weather conditions. And that's a lot more favorable when you're going up against an offense that isn't explosive and it's not potent. It's a little easier to widen the gap, I think. That's not to discredit what they did because it was extremely impressive. But again, I have my reservations about their ability when they're going up, especially on defensively, when they're going up against some of the more prolific offensive teams. Like they're facing the Chiefs this weekend. I'll be curious to see how their defense holds up. I know it was the number 1 rated defense in the regular season, but again, the Patriots aren't a true measuring stick of where this team's defense necessarily stacks up in relation to other great elite offenses. So that's the only concern that I have about the Bills. So I have them at number 5. Number 4 is a close toss-up, but I'm going with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They've won 4 straight games. They easily beat the Philadelphia Eagles 31-15, although they led 31-0 entering the fourth quarter. So those 2 late garbage touchdowns don't really mean much to me. First of all, anytime you have Tom Brady in the postseason, your team has a great chance of winning. That should just be a given at that point. But what I loved most about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is their defense. And their defense kind of returned to form from last season's postseason run, in which their defense was elite. They're getting a lot healthier. Jason Pierre-Paul came back. Levante David is back. Carlton Davis is playing well. Devin White's the linebacking core is great. Shaq Barrett could be coming back. Their running backs are healthier. Leonard Fournette is expected to play. Potentially also Ronald Jones to kind of star ahead of Giovanni Bernard and Keyshawn Vaughn. And obviously, even though there's no Chris Godwin or Antonio Brown, you still have Mike Evans, you still have Gronk, you still have Tyler Johnson, you still have Cameron Brate, and you can throw it to those running backs, which is something that Tom Brady loves to do. And so he still has, I think, enough weapons to still generate a lot of offense with this team. The only concern that I have about them is their offensive line. Tristan Wirfs is dealing with an ankle injury that forced him to miss about half the game against the Eagles, and that was kind of what allowed the Eagles pass rush to get to Tom Brady and to sack him 4 times. When the O-line is healthy, they do a great job protecting Brady, but when it collapses, that's where he's more susceptible. And now Ryan Jensen, their starting center, it's uncertain whether he's ready to go for Sunday. And if he is ready to go, how healthy will he be? So they're a little bit susceptible against teams with a great pass rush. And that's a problem for a guy in Brady who's 44, immobile. He needs that protection. And if it's not shored up with Wirfs or with Jensen or anyone else, especially going up against a team like the Rams, that could pose some problems. So that's why I have them at number 4. And speaking of the Rams, I have them at number 3. Again, the Rams and the Bucs, very close, narrow split between those two teams right now. But they did smoke the Cardinals 34-11. Their defense just terrorized Kyler Murray. He had the worst game of his career. 7.6 QBR. He just looked terrified out there. And they forced 2 interceptions, 2 sacks, a forced fumble. And truthfully, there aren't many glaring weaknesses when you look at this Rams team, because offensively, Otto Beckham Jr. is thriving. He's flourishing in this offense. He had a touchdown reception against the Cardinals. He's had 6 touchdown receptions over his last 9 games since joining the team. So he's doing a great job of complimenting Cooper Kupp, and obviously serving a great number 2 role alongside Van Jefferson. You still have Tyler Higbee as a reliable tight end. So they've got some really nice pieces, especially now that he is gelling, and their running back position has shored up a lot. Cam Akers is back. It's almost miraculous that he's back when he ruptured his Achilles in just like August, and he's back playing. It's kind of unfathomable, but it's amazing that he is now joining up. Sony Michel is doing a great job running the football. You still have Darrell Henderson as your third back, so they've shored up the running back position. Obviously, Sean McVay is proving to be a great coach. The only question mark with the Rams is with Matthew Stafford. Is how will Matthew Stafford play in these high leverage moments the farther along the Rams go in the postseason? Because we know that in his 3 postseason trips with the Lions, he couldn't win a game. So he just collected his first win, but he only had to throw the ball 17 times. They were able to rely on their defense and the run game to carry the load. Well, against a team like the Buccaneers, he's going to have to throw it a lot more than 17 times. And can he play well on the road? That's been the bigger issue for Matthew Stafford. Is at home, he's been a really good quarterback. On the road, it's been a little bit of a toss-up. And so that's the question mark regarding him. At number 2 is the Kansas City Chiefs. Listen, the Kansas City Chiefs, they've won 10 of their last 11 games. They've scored 30-plus points in 4 out of their last 5 games. So this team is clearly clicking on all cylinders on offense. And it's because Patrick Mahomes, his decision-making, he's been a lot smarter and cautious with the football. Doesn't mean he's not flinging it around. He's not taking as many chances, although that is true. But he's showing a lot more restraint, a lot more patience. He's trusting his receivers. He is distributing the ball judiciously. He's taking what the defense is giving to him. And so when you've got a much more patient Patrick Mahomes who's not trying to force quite as many things, that's a really dangerous Mahomes. And you combine that with Andy Reid, the brilliance he displays on offense with his play calling, that's a tall task. They've got just a bevy of wide receiver options. Again, you just see the depth of this team with not only Kelsey and Hill, but Hardman and Pringle and Robinson and McKinnon. There's so many guys that are making plays, not to mention Clyde Edwards-Helaire could be back. So they have so many options that they can turn to, and their defense has been playing a lot better. And especially in the first quarters and the first halves of games, their defense has been almost stout over the last 10, 11 games. And so what that's done is it's given their offense the opportunity to build leads. And when you're facing the Kansas City Chiefs, your biggest nightmare is a large deficit, because then it puts so much added pressure on your offense to have to try and match the scoring prowess of the Chiefs offense. It's not so much that the defense can't hold up against the Chiefs offense, but it's your own team's offense now in a hole trying to play hurry up against a Chiefs offense that thrives in those types of situations. So that's why I've got Kansas City at number 2. And at number 1, I've been consistent about this for a while, the Green Bay Packers. I just think from outside, with the exception of week 1, they've been the most balanced and the most consistent team all season. Aaron Rodgers is the front runner for MVP. The chemistry he has with Devontae Adams perhaps is the best in football for a quarterback wide receiver duo. Maybe Stafford and Cooper Kupp are challenging, but I still think Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers is the best 1-2 duo right now in the NFL. He's got Lazard and Valdez-Scantling playing well. Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, you got the power and the finesse run game. And to me, listen, no team is perfect. Every team has some flaws. The Green Bay Packers defense is a little bit susceptible to the run. That's true. But no team is perfect. And they've got great linebackers. They get after your quarterback. Preston Smith and Zadarius Smith should be both back. David Bakhtiari, their starting left tackle, should be back to shore up the offensive line. And their defense, especially their secondary, is elite. They're very opportunistic. Jair Alexander should be back. So I like the Packers as the best team right now. Again, they got a bye week for receiving the number 1 overall seed, but I like them as the number 1 team right now in the postseason. So that's kind of the NFL wrap up. Can't wait for the divisional games to take place this Saturday and Sunday. I did want to transition to some tragic news, but I also think that she's deserving of being talked about. So we were notified yesterday, unfortunately, of the sad passing of Lusia Harris. Died at the age of 66. She's a Hall of Famer, a pioneer when it comes to women's basketball from Minter City, Mississippi. But she did so many things for the game of basketball, especially for women's basketball. She put Delta State on the map. She won 3 national championships with Delta State. At the time, they were playing in the IAW era, which essentially served as a proxy for the NCAA tournament. It was the women's national basketball tournament that they were competing for. And she won 3 titles at Delta State, 1975, 1976, 1977. She became the first woman to score a bucket in the Olympics. So she was part of the first ever 1976 women's Olympic basketball team. She scored the first ever point. It was against Japan at the Montreal Games. In fact, that was a year that the U.S. won the silver medal. Harris was the leading scorer and rebounder on the team. But when you just look at those accomplishments, and there's still others that I'm going to touch on, that's etched in stone. That's already leaving an indelible mark on the game of basketball. When you think about the Mount Rushmore for the most influential women's basketball players, Lusia Harris is on that list. She would probably be in the George Washington place on Mount Rushmore, the first one to have her face chiseled in the mountain. The WNBA wasn't formed until 1996, so these AIAW tournaments were the most coveted tournaments for women's basketball players. She won that 3 times. She was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1992. She was actually the first Black woman to be inducted into the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame in 1992. And when you look at some of her contemporaries, Marianne Stanley, who's the current head coach of the Indiana Fever, played for Immaculata, which was another team in the AIAW era that competed against Delta State during those championship years. And they won in 1972 through 1974. But in 1975, 1976, Coach Staley faced off against Harris, just for some context as far as who's still around and the connection to Harris. And get this, in her career, Lusia Harris, she was a 3-time All-American. She set the school record for the most points, 2,891, rebounds with 1,662. She averaged 26 points per game, 14 and a half rebounds in 115 career games, 63% from the floor. Not only that, she was the first woman officially drafted by an NBA team. She was the only woman that was ever drafted by a team. It was the New Orleans Jazz at the time in 1977 that drafted her. And now she wasn't officially able to try out for the Jazz because she was pregnant, so she played in the Women's Professional Basketball League in 1979 and 1980. But again, she was the first Black woman inducted into the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. In 1992, she was extremely charitable, both in and out of her community. And they even just came out with a detailed series about her. The Queen of Basketball was a featured 2021 short film that detailed her career. And it's deserving because when you talk about the history of women's basketball, you can't discuss it without talking about Lusia Harris. Again, I said earlier that I think that she's on the Mount Rushmore for the most influential women's basketball players of all time. You can't tell the story of women's basketball without her. The WNBA doesn't exist without her. And it's a shame that we lost her at such a young age, but such a profound life, such a profound impact that she had on the sports community and on the game of basketball. And she will have forever left an indelible mark in that sport. So RIP to Lusia Harris. All right, final topic. My Malkins moments. I have some great Malkins moments for you. Realize I actually tossed a couple of them. Grab that back. I always prematurely do that sometimes. So, I have some great Malkins moments for you. First, Willie O'Ree, who was a Boston Bruin for 2 seasons in 1957 and 1958. That season, in 1960, 1961, had his number 22 jersey retired by the Bruins last night at TD Garden. He was the first Black player to appear in an NHL game. He broke the barrier, the white barrier in 1958. Really, the NHL's color barrier in 1958, January 18th. Wow, nearly on the day. It was yesterday. Today's the 19th. It was a game between the Bruins and the Montreal Canadiens. He played 45 games in the NHL. Again, those 2 seasons, 57, 58, 60, 61. And the thing about him was he played with a certain amount of flair. Now, granted, I wasn't alive to see it, but from what I read, his trademark was the fedora. Now, I can tell you from firsthand, anytime you're able to pull off a fedora successfully, you've got a bit of style and a bit of panache, because that is hard to pull off. And he was known for doing that. And he is the 12th Bruins player to have his number retired, and he was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 2018. He's obviously been an incredible ambassador of the sport, and he's officially served as the diversity ambassador of the NHL, or one of them in the NHL. And he kind of is from New Brunswick, so in Canada. I think it's Fredericton is the specific city I believe that he's from. So it kind of serves as a nice gateway between Canada and the U.S., obviously, but he's been serving as a diversity ambassador of the NHL the past few decades. And to honor him, really, the city of Boston celebrated him yesterday. They dedicated January 18th as the Willie O'Ree Day. So you had Fenway Park, Gillette Stadium, and City Hall were all lit up in gold yesterday to honor him. Other arenas around the NHL lit up those colors on their Jumbotron. So big shout out to him on getting his jersey retired. Obviously broke the NHL's color barrier. So major shout out to Willie O'Ree. Bayern Munich's Robert Lewandowski. Lewandowski really is how they pronounce it, but I don't have the thick accent. Was the FIFA men's, the best FIFA men's player of 2021. He edged out Lionel Messi and Mo Salah. And it's interesting because he obviously missed out on the Ballon d'Or award. He finished just behind Lionel Messi. We overlook Lewandowski because Messi gets all the shine and Ronaldo gets all the shine, and Mbappe and Neymar and all these guys. And yet what Lewandowski has been doing since he's been a part of Bayern Munich is spectacular. He's had one of the best stretches ever. It's his second straight FIFA Player of the Year honor for Lewandowski. He scored 23 goals in 19 Bundesliga games, matches this season to lead all players in the top 5 leagues. So you're talking about also the Premier League and La Liga, all the top 5 leagues, Serie 1, the Italian league. So he scored the most goals in those 19 matches. And the 33-year-old, he set a Bundesliga record scoring 41 goals last season. He broke Gerd Muller's record for 40 in 1971 and 1972. He helped Bayern Munich capture their 9th straight league title, Bundesliga title, as well as the FIFA Club World Cup. They won the Champions League in 2020, which is the ultimate kind of coronation of the best club in the world when you're facing the most elite clubs in a Champions League. That's why it's called that. And the team has finished first in the Bundesliga in all 7 years with Lewandowski on the roster, and they currently sit atop the rankings this year as well. So major shout out and congratulations to him. Couple more. The San Jose Sharks, their forward Timo Meier set a franchise record for 5 goals in a win a couple of days ago against the LA Kings. The Sharks won 6-2. Here's the thing. So not only did he become the first player ever in Sharks history to score 5 goals in a game, he scored those 5 goals in the first 2 periods. He still had another 20-minute period to go, and he already achieved and accomplished that feat. So the last player to have ever scored 5 goals in the first 2 periods of an NHL game was Peter Bondra for the Washington Capitals in 1994. It's rarely happened. It seldom happens. And major shout out to Meier. I was watching those highlights. They weren't just like easy breakaway one-on-ones with the goalkeepers or penalty shootouts. No, they were through traffic, behind, flicking from behind with his stick, just some slap shots. It was really, really nicely done. He did a great job. Shout out to him. And finally, shout out to the LA Rams collecting their first win at SoFi. Obviously, it was the first time they've been in the postseason where they could play a game at SoFi. They were a wild card team last year, so they had to play all their games on the road. They beat the Arizona Cardinals 34-11, but here is why they have reached Malkin's moments this week. David Long on defense recorded a 3-yard pick six of Kyler Murray to end up giving the Rams a 21-0 lead at halftime. That 3-yard pick six is the shortest pick six in the NFL's postseason history. We've never seen a pick six from 3 yards out. Now we've got it thanks to David Long. And Otto Beckham Jr., also need to give a shout out to him. He became the first player in NFL postseason history to finish with a 30-yard reception and a 30-yard completion in the same game. He caught 4 passes for 54 yards and a touchdown, completed a 40-yard pass to Cam Akers, and it was a special performance. He received his first NFL postseason touchdown against the Cardinals, so shout out to Odell Beckham Jr. Well, that's all the time that I got for today. Thank you so much for joining me right here on Morning Joe every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe, J-O, with Jonah Malkin on YouTube, Jonah Malkin on Twitter, @morning_Joe, as well on Twitter, JMalk97 on Instagram, and Jonah Malkin on TikTok. Thank you so much. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.